Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. As part of our ongoing svadhyaya, study of the teachings of the yogic masters, this year we have decided to study this text known as Shvetashvatara-Upanishad, a collection of teachings by sage Śvetāśvatara, the meaning of which means someone who has cleansed, purified one's horses, which means the senses, the five senses of perception and the five senses of action, through the practice of yoga, by reducing the quality of hyperactivity, which is rajas, and the quality of torpor, tamas, by bringing an equilibrium to the various levels of this human person. And this is why this seems to be the very first known extant text from the Upanishads, which directly, clearly mentions asana, and not only the idea of asana, but that the idea of alignment which pervades asana has been mentioned in this text. So we have, in our previous discussions, we have already read the first verse, which consists of some very basic fundamental questions that most of us ask as a child. We want to know the meaning of this existence, what it is, from where it has come. So what happened in those extremely ancient times is that a group of sages who had the tendency of discoursing, which means discussing Brahman, which means, first of all, the teachings, the ancient yogic teachings, the Vedas. The word Brahman also refers to the Vedas, to the hymns of the Vedas, as well as pure undifferentiated consciousness. So those who discourse on Brahman, they asked these questions by coming together into a group. What is Brahman, the cause of this universe? From where are we born? By what do we live? And into what do we merge? O you all who know Brahman, presided over by whom do we live in pleasure and in the other, which means in suffering? Why are these two so inevitable? Each in our respective individual situations. Already discussed this quite a bit. Now it's the time to look at the answers. So the answer to these questions comes particularly in the second verse. The masters, they are not collecting answers, but they are collecting various candidates, various possible candidates as an answer. Various possibilities have been collected, which were discussed by them in great detail, but were found to be unsatisfactory as answers to this fundamental question. Why were they found unsatisfactory? That has not been mentioned in the individual case, but collectively why they found them unsatisfactory, that has been mentioned in the second verse. So it is sort of a summary of the discussion that they had before they decided that words have their limitation. And instead of trying to find an answer with the help of words, let us go into the inner depths, trans-verbal depths, which are beyond words. Let us explore those depths, which are only accessible to a practitioner of yoga. Before that, they analyzed all these possibilities, but at the end, when they decided that words have their limitations, that in the third verse what we see is that they decide to take the path of meditation, of silence, of yoga, and look for those answers within themselves. After all the views expressed here, and these were some of the prominent views that have been mentioned here, which were prominent even at the time of the Buddha. So, for example, in the Pali literature, the Buddha very clearly enumerates, summarizes some of these views. As we will study the verse, I will try to show that connection with the Pali literature as well. But first of all, let us first read the Sanskrit portion of this second mantra. We'll pronounce it. Kālaḥ svabhāvo niyatir yadṛcchā bhūtāni yoniḥ puruṣa iti cintyā Saṁyoga eṣāṁ ātma-bhāvād ātmāpy anīśāḥ sukha dukkha hetuh. Kālaḥ svabhāvo niyatir yadṛcchā bhūtāni yoniḥ puruṣa iti cintyā Saṁyoga eṣāṁ natva ātma-bhāvād ātmāpy anīśāḥ sukha dukkha hetoh. Should time, one's own nature, destiny, chance, or the elements be considered the origin, or puruṣa, the indwelling consciousness, it cannot be a combination of these, time, etc., because of the presence of ātman, the indwelling consciousness, also not ātman itself, which is so powerless because of the cause of pleasure and suffering. Okay. Now let us analyze what this mantra, what the Rishi wants to convey, what the Upanishad wants to convey with the help of, through this mantra. What they analyzed. So the first thing that they analyzed was time. The Sanskrit word for time is very interesting. It tells us a lot about the concept, the way time was perceived by the ancient thinkers. Time is that, generally speaking, it is that substance which continuously changes everyone and everything. One can say that everything flows through time. Time is literally that vessel through which everything flows. And everything really means everything, which means material aspects as well as on the psychological level. Thoughts constantly flow through time. We have past thoughts, present thoughts, and future thoughts. And it is really the fundamental principle of change, because everything changes through it. It can very clearly be seen past, present. The things as they are in the present moment are different from as they were in the past. And in the future, most likely, they will be different. However, at the same time, Kālaḥ was also seen as very much circular. And from where does this notion come? Let us look at the word Kālaḥ. Kālaḥ is derived from the root kala. Kala, which means to count. To count. And you have it also in English, in fact. Calculate. That calculus. To that kala. Kalanam, which means to count. To count. And you can only count that which has parts, which has discrete parts. You can't count a single unified whole, which is what Brahman, pure consciousness, is, a unified whole, and that's why it cannot be counted, and that's why it is considered akala, or beyond counting, or sometimes akala, beyond time, or akala, which means beyond parts, because it cannot be counted. So kala means to count, kala means parts, and kala means time. So in Sanskrit, 3 different words, very similar, just depending on where the stress is, where the long vowel is. If both are short, it means counting. If the end is long and the first one is short, it means parts. So for example, the moon has 16 kalas, which means the moon has 16 parts. You see moon in its 16 different shapes. So they are different parts and they can be counted every night, slightly different, a little bit more, a little bit more. So they are referred to as Kālaḥ. And a combination of that is called Kālaḥ, time. So like matter, the idea is that time too can be conceptually divided, and it can be counted. And the idea that we find in the Upanishads is that the concept of time arises as heavenly bodies, which means the sun and the moon and the stars, they travel particularly in circle. Because the sun is traveling in circle, the moon is traveling in circle. So as they travel in circles in the firmament, they give us the notion of time. That is how the concept of time is defined in some of the Upanishads. It is extremely subtle. Time is extremely subtle. But these, before the creation of these watches, these were the timekeepers in this universe, and they enabled to divide that very subtle aspect of this universe into discrete parts, days, nights, 16 nights, which means a fortnight, 1 month, usually how the moon, that's why the Indians follow the lunar calendar. And then when it comes to the whole year, then the 12 months when the sun has traveled from the northern hemisphere into the southern hemisphere, which can be seen very clearly. When the sun is traveling in the northern hemisphere, it rises more into the north, and when it's in the southern hemisphere, it rises a little bit more towards the south, known as the southern traveling of the sun and the northern traveling of sun, which then gives the idea of 1 year, a year of 12 months. So like this, these heavenly bodies which circulate in circles, they give us this notion of divisible time which can be divided. And it was quite logical based on the way time is perceived and kept with the help of these bodies, that time itself was seen as circular, not as an arrow. But that's why this idea of Kālaḥ, the wheel of time, is very prominent at least in the Indian way of thinking. And I would say in all ways of thinkings, except in the ancient times, in the Semitic traditions from which Christianity, Islam, and Judaism arose, they have a very linear concept of time. But all other cultures had a very circular understanding of time. However, so this is time, the first thing that they considered. The second thing that they considered was svabhāvo, the second one. One's own nature, one's inherent nature. What is meant is that, like heat is the very inherent nature of fire, you don't need to explain it, you shouldn't look. So it's an approach that you shouldn't even look for a cause. Don't ask these questions. It's just the inherent nature of things that they arise, exist, and merge. Don't look for a cause. Don't inquire. Don't try to find an answer. Like, it doesn't make sense to try to explain why fire is hot, why water is cold, why wind sometimes is hot, sometimes is cold, why water is sometimes hot and why water is sometimes cold. It's just the nature of things. It's just how things are. It's just how they have been created, that's all. It's just their unique feature of things. So svabhāvo, that's why even in Hindi language when we say that what is the unique feature of this person, how is this person's behavior? For behavior we use the word svabhāvo, which means what is the unique feature? How is this person different from the others? What makes this person deeply individual, different from others, that inherent property. So this is sort of an approach in which you are not giving an answer, you are not telling anything, and you are also not looking for an answer, but just saying that, well, this is how things are, just accept it. It's just the nature of things. Ultimately, also the Upanishads, they say that creation is the very nature of consciousness. Whenever consciousness and energy, they come together, creation is neither, it has to look for a purpose, whether it is to enjoy oneself or whether it is simply a play. The Upanishadic masters usually say that, for example, Gaudapada in his collection of teachings on Mandukya Upanishad, where he says that some people think that the universe wanted to enjoy itself by creating all this, amuse itself, that's why it created it. Some say that why should it want to amuse itself? That means that it is lacking something. And that's why it was simply, it's just a play. Then he says that neither both are true. What seems true is that it is the very nature of consciousness to divide itself through energy into many and then identify with one tiny little division. That's why also, why do we create this entire world of dreams? There is no answer, no real answer to that. It's just the very nature of consciousness. The impressions are there, the energy is there, and that's why the whole world of thoughts and images is created, and consciousness just tends to identify with one of them. So it's the very nature of things. So to a great extent, each one of these is accepted, but it's not accepted as the highest truth, as the only truth. There is a greater truth than that as well. So all of them are partially accepted. Even time is not being negated. It is partially accepted as a reality which brings everything into existence. But on its own, it's not enough to explain everything. We need something more. The third one that is mentioned is then destiny. Destiny means the prefixed order of things. Niyati comes from niyama. Niyama, which means order. And so niyati it's again a kind of answer that it's just destiny. Everything comes into existence because it was destined to come into existence. That's all. It's just... And there were many fatalist views. Fatalism means views that consider fate to be the supreme governing principle in ancient India. Even at the time of the Buddha, one of his contemporary, his name was Makkali Gosala. He was the leader of a very ancient sect of renunciates known as the Ajivakas. And they were, I think, a group of individuals who even did not accept the idea of karma. They did not accept the idea of karma. So you had all kinds of ascetics in ancient India. Those who completely denied the idea of God, and even those who completely denied the idea of karma. So these they completely denied the idea of karma. He taught that what can be considered a form of fatalism, that the idea that all events are predetermined by fate. Even our actions are totally predetermined by fate. Whatever we do has already been determined. So he even denies causality and says that the entire cosmic process is rigidly controlled by destiny, by niyati. In fact, let me see. Yes, the Buddha quotes him as saying, the Buddha quotes him because we don't have the teachings of Makkhali Gosala himself, but Buddha quotes his teachings in the Pali literature, saying that there is no power, there is no energy, there is no manly strength, there is no manly endurance. All beings, all living things, all creatures, all souls are without any kind of mastery, they are without any kind of power, they are without any kind of energy, molded simply by destiny, circumstances, and nature. What we have, the third one, which we have svabhāvo. They experience pleasure and pain. So it's just destiny. If I'm suffering, that's my destiny. I can't do anything about it. So that is the idea of niyati. In the yogic traditions, the tendency is to completely negate any destiny other than what is the result of one's past actions. At least that is how one should engage on the path of yoga. When there was a very great master at the time when Alexander came to India. His name was Chanakya, and he chose a young boy and made him into one of the greatest rulers of India. Instead of becoming himself a ruler, he made his student his disciple. But he was the mastermind, and he is also considered to be the author of one of the first works on economics. So when he was asked that, when his student Chandragupta asks him, if destiny is the truth, then why should I work? To this he said, maybe it's the destiny that you should achieve your goal by working. So even if it's destiny is the supreme truth, the destiny is our destiny as human beings, at least, because this is a karma yoni, which means this is a life form in which we can perform actions. We have the capacity to choose, and we are not totally we don't need to be totally governed by our circumstances or our instincts or our preconditionings. But we can also think above that, think beyond that. We have that capacity, unlike maybe other life forms. Maybe, I'm just saying maybe. I don't know, I'm not sure. But that's how it seems, that they rather just are completely governed by their instincts. Not always, but most of the times. As human beings, we have this freedom. We are somewhere in between, not totally bound to our circumstances and destiny, but also not totally free from it. And that's why we have to somehow find a balance between the idea of karma, that our destiny is to reach our destiny through hard work. And that's why in the yogic path, the masters say that only those evoke destiny who are lazy, who don't want to do anything about their circumstances. They say, oh, this was my destiny. So, niyati, destiny. This is the next one that they considered. And then the next one that they considered was chance. Yadṛcchā. Yadṛcchā means chance. Something that just happens suddenly. Just like when you play dice, it just happens that the number that comes up, it's just a chance. That's it. So the other view is that instead of destiny, it is simply whatever is happening is just a chance, suddenly. The word yadṛcchā occurs also in the yogic literature in the context of contentment, to be happy with whatever, to be content with whatever a person, in material terms, to be content with whatever someone has acquired by chance. And the example usually that is given for chance is that there was a crow. It came flying, sat under a tree, and the coconut falls on it in that moment on its head, and the crow dies. That is the typical classical example of, as it is called, not coconut, but tālaḥ. Tālaḥ is a smaller fruit. Yes. But it's that palm fruit. Still, it's that palm fruit. Yes, palm fruit. I think from which they make the notorious palm oil. Yes. So it falls, and it just, in that moment, the crow just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the sad occurrence takes place. So that is yadṛcchā. Now to look there for niyati, for some that billions and billions years ago, somebody was sitting at the beginning of creation and decided that this particular crow will fly into this particular location at this particular time, and then this particular... That's too much. That's considering too much. And that's why yadṛcchā, chance, just chance. It just happens to be a chance in this universe that we are in these circumstances. We happen to be in this particular universe out of millions and millions, endless universes. And it just happens that everything comes into existence. That is also a very convincing view, of course. There is some difference between destiny and between chance, between pre-existing rules and between chance. Usually the example that the classical example that the masters give to point out the very difference between chance and destiny is that every mother goes through what is it called, the fruition period or fruition period? How is it called in English? Fruition period, yes, fruition period. So a mother can only conceive during that fruition period, ritukala as it is called, not in other times. This is a rule. This is a pre-existing rule. But whether she actually conceives or not, that is chance. So that is the difference. And this is how also both can infect the masters, instead of seeing them as two opposing entities, because generally the idea is that if you subscribe to destiny, the notion of chance doesn't make sense. And if you subscribe to the idea of chance, then the idea of destiny doesn't make sense. This is because then whenever our mind thinks about particular concepts, it becomes conditioned by that. So the Vedantic masters, what they try to show is that in this unified whole, which gets divided by the mind, this universe which is a single unified whole, with which when the mind engages, it starts cutting it into pieces, into concepts, because the mind is not infinite. The mind might be extended, but the mind is not infinite. And so to make sense and to deal with the infinite, it has to cut infinite into pieces. That is what we call concepts, notions, ideas. And then when it takes a chunk from here and a chunk from here and brings them together, they seem totally opposing. It's like those blind people describing the same elephant, one describing this part and that describing, and then thinking how different this description is. Yet the fact is that all those descriptions are describing the same unified reality. So in the same way, just to show how time, the very nature of things, deep down, these ideas have not been rejected, but they work in a very specific way together. And at the same time, they have no influence on something very unique, something very subtle, which is consciousness, which the Upanishadic masters want to explore by going beyond these and their effects, which are limited to the material world. That is basically the yogic idea. So through this example, they try to show how niyati, which means destiny, and chance, they both, so on one side is destiny, that it's only when the mother ovulates when the egg is actually present. And the egg is always present. All the eggs have already been created at the moment of birth. All the eggs that a mother will ever release in her life, all of them are already created at the moment when she is born. They are there, but just one by one when they get released. So that sort of creates the destiny for the child to arise. And the chance is whether it happens or not. So, and there is also tremendous effort on the part of the sperm is there. It has to make tremendous effort to reach out from the father's body and then ultimately to reach the depths of the womb. It has literally to travel. It has to travel in thousands and thousands, and only one of them, the strongest, maybe you can call it the smartest, the fastest, the most robust one, makes it and becomes all of us here. Gets this. It's a tremendous journey. Even if you just think of that journey, it's a tremendous journey. But many issues are involved there. Destiny is involved. Chance is involved. One's own tremendous effort is involved. And also some help from the side of mother is also involved. When the sperm needs to climb up into what is known as the cervix, the most tiniest portion of the inner part of the womb, it cannot climb on its own. So the descriptions that I have read, there is a very beautiful documentary, The Great Sperm Race, produced by BBC, which describes the entire journey from the moment of the physical union of mother and father till the sperm actually meets the egg, and how mucus actually dangles down so that the sperm can use it to climb up at a place where the sperm would never be able to cross. There, mother's body, you can call it Mother Nature, also comes to our aid. So everything is combined. Success requires all of them. Also on the path of yoga, tremendous hard work, tremendous also destiny. It's also a matter of chance. It is a matter of destiny. And it is also a matter of help by the universe. But all of that is not in our hands. What is in our hands is tremendous hard work. That is what we can do, and that's why yoga emphasizes on hard work. And not giving up hard work, saying if the sperm in the very beginning would think that, oh, if it's just all destiny, why should I run towards the egg? Then there would be no human beings. So if all would think like that, there will be no yogis. So both of them are important. And then also the next one is elements, the very constituents of everything that comes into existence, the very elements, the five elements, which is earth, water, fire, wind, and space, which is present. All of them, five of them are present in a very particular way. They are present in the human body. It's a particular construction of these five. They also considered the five elements. They analyzed, like we are analyzing each one of them. They analyzed each one of them and thought, can any one of them be considered the origin? The word that has been used here for origin is yoniḥ. Yoniḥ, origin. Can any one of these be the origin? Because they were after the origin. They wanted to find the origin of everything. And the word is a very beautiful word, and it's a very divine word also, because in Sanskrit language, the word is also used for the womb in which the child is created. The word yoniḥ is also physically, it refers to the womb in which the child is created. And the reason is, again, the root yu means to mix up. Mix up. And what the motherly womb does, that it mixes up these five elements in such a way which no one else has succeeded to mix them up in such a way, at least till now, that a human being, a living being, can be created. That's a unique thing. So, but what does it do? What does the womb of the mother do? It just brings together all these elements and structures them in such a way, in such a unique way. It structures them in such a unique way that a brain, I would say the most subtle and most complex creation that can be created out of matter, is created, in which then that omnipresent universal consciousness can get reflected. So that gets created. I just simply mixing together all these five elements. That is all what the mother is taking. She's just taking these five elements constantly. The space element is present everywhere. It is already present. The child is literally swimming in a bag of water. So water is there. Fire, heat is there. It is extremely essential. Even if the egg comes out, in the case of birds, they have to keep it hot so that it can develop into the child. So all these elements, wind, all these elements, and of course earthly element, all of them are tremendously important. And yet what the mother does, what that manifestation of the motherly energy, Shakti, which they will explore later, what it does, this earthly manifestation of that does, that she structures them in such a way that this human body is produced. That's why the word yoniḥ derives from the Sanskrit word, Sanskrit root yu, which means to mix together. Yu mishrani, to mix together. So what is that which mixes all these time, their own nature, destiny, chance, the 5 elements, in such a way that this universe, this visible universe, this perceivable, tangible universe comes into existence? Which one of them is yoniḥ, is that which brings all of them together and thus gives rise to this, to my existence? Or there is one essence which is not yet covered by any one of these, which is consciousness. Consciousness seems so different from time. Consciousness seems so different from the nature of things. The nature of things, it doesn't look like things are conscious. And similarly, how should consciousness be part of destiny? How should be just it merely a chance? And even 5 elements themselves, they don't seem like conscious. And yet, because all around us, we clearly can't see consciousness. Things, most of the material entities lying around in the world, they are clearly unconscious. And yet, how does this consciousness come into existence? So the word which has been used here for consciousness is puruṣa. Pura means city, and sha means that which dwells in the city. So this body is very often referred to in the Upanishads as a citadel. City, which means citadel. In Greek, the word polis, for example, in Acropolis, in Athens, Acropolis, that polis, puras. In Sanskrit, polis is puras. Acropolis would be just agrapuras in Sanskrit, which means a city, a citadel on top of a mountain. That's what Acropolis is. So puras means citadel. So there are external citadels, and there are also very strong. This is also a citadel. There is a huge army in it. There are cleaning entities in it. There are cells which clean the different parts, the principles which clean the different parts of the body. There are aspects of our body which take care of the economy in this body. There are cells which protect the body, and then there are intellectual cells which think. So all the different aspects of society can be found within this city itself. And the 8 layers of the body, known as the ashtadhatus, skin plus the 7 inner. They are sometimes referred to as the 8 ramparts. 8 ramparts, like a citadel has coverings to protect itself. Similarly, the external most is the skin, and beneath that is blood, beneath that is fat, beneath that is fat, and beneath that is bone. In bone is bone marrow, and then the seed of the human being. And these are the different ramparts, ashtachakra, and then the doors through which the citadel interacts with the world out there. That's why, in fact, this is Ayodhya. Ayodhya, which today is a very religious center where Lord Rama was born in India. Originally, in the most ancient collection of teachings, this word Ayodhya was, in the Vedas, is used to refer to the body. And Ayodhya means that which cannot be easily fought against, which cannot be easily overcome, which means a very strong, a very powerful citadel. That's what the word Ayodhya means in some of the Vedic passages. Ashtachakra, the one with 8 ramparts, Navadvara, and 9 doors, Devanam Purayodhya, these energies in the form of the 5 senses of perception, the 5 senses of action, and the 4 inner instruments, the mind, the intellect, the ego, and the seat of memory. They are like the inhabitants, and they live Devanam Pur, which means Pur, this city, and it is called Ayodhya. So the word Ayodhya, which today is a city originally in the most ancient collection of teachings, simply refers to the human body. So the one that dwells in that, the indwelling consciousness, the consciousness present within, and thus limited by this body, which is from the tip of the toes to the very crown of the head, permeates the entire body, this layer of consciousness that is called puruṣa. They analyzed all of them. They thought, they discussed. They did not meditate, but they discussed. They verbally discussed about all of them, but did not found. So iti cintyā. Cintyā means they considered which one of these can be referred to by the word Brahman, by Brahman, which simply means the mightiest, the all-encompassing one, the expanding one, the greatest. Which one of them, for which one of these can we use the word Brahman, which is the central topic of the Upanishadic teachings, Brahman, the supreme. Which one of these can be referred to? That is what they analyzed, what they thought. But, so this was a summary of their discussion, just pointing out, but they found it unsatisfactory. But why did they find it unsatisfactory? That is what we are going to discuss in our next session. None of them is on its own satisfactory. One thing, if we want to choose one thing, then none of them is satisfactory. And why not? Any questions or any observations, any thoughts? You can let me know. We will just be in silence. And if any thought comes up, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll just be in silence for a few minutes just to imbibe it. This time, silence doesn't mean that you cannot speak. If a question comes. 5 minutes. Yeah.
It's interesting. This is a question exactly, but it's something that occurred to me when we were speaking today about fate and chance. And it's one part from the Mahabharata that is always a little bit perplexing to me, is when this dice game is somehow both fated and both chance, and that somehow his nature to be a person who wants to gamble is fated. So then I think, well, but then how is this chance? And so it's something that it's very difficult to reconcile. And so just when we were speaking today, it really brought this up in my mind, and just how difficult it is to
to reconcile both of them. Yes, 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 yes. And it is, yeah, through this example that the masters give, the fruition period, and the fact that, so on one side, fate sort of creates the ground with some limitations. And I think this is very unique also about most of the Indian art forms, for example. For example, dance in India is not very strictly structured. So you have a general sort of general rules and regulations, but within that you have a lot of freedom. That doesn't mean that you have total freedom. So, but within that limitation, even in singing, for example, you have the ragas, so you have a basic structure which defines the raga, but how you express it, in that you have total freedom. There are no symphonies of great musicians, which then are always recited in the same structured way, but there is each and every dancer and singer presents and has tremendous freedom in that. And I think the same thing also when we study yoga, we have to incorporate both. That on one side, yoga gives us this basic structure for practice, but within that structure, avoiding the pitfalls and avoiding where things can become harmful by being too free. That just to acknowledge where the pitfalls are there, where it can become harmful. Within that, there should be total freedom. So it's somehow a balance between freedom and also at the same time between limitation. So this basic structure is always also with philosophy everywhere, in whatever we do. Some basic niyamas, ahimsa, satyā, they have to be accepted. And within that, there is tremendous. So they are not rigid. Within them, there is a lot of elbow room. So, yeah. So let us have total silence for, like you all have. It's just me who is speaking, so I have to become silent. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. My humble salutations to you. Thank you very much.